So I got some rest last night. But I want to say God provides these things, and he was providing this stuff for Elijah. He said, and then we look at there was the brook which provided water until it did. You know, he provided food and water. He took care of Elijah. You know, so what do you do when God sends you out and your provisions fail? He sent Elijah, said, go. Just go. I will sustain you. You know, he sustains us today. You know, you say, well, I sustain myself going to the grocery store and get me something to eat. Whatever you think, but I promise you one thing, if God didn't give you a job and you be able to make some money, or you had to have a SNAP card, you ain't getting no groceries up there for free. God sustains us. He gives us the power and the will and the faith and the ability to go out and make a living. People say, oh, I did that on my own. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. If you don't believe it, be in one job and then he's all of a sudden move you somewhere else. And you say, well, I like this job, but all of a sudden this job just closes down. All of a sudden he puts you somewhere else. And you don't know what to do for a couple of weeks until you realize that God really put you in the right spot. You know, when God does some moving in your life, don't stress on it. Just let it go. That's what I would say. You know, as Christ followers, we sometimes believe the lie that just because we are obedient, God will make things easy. However, we learn from experience that God often brings us into hard places when the brooks of comfort, refreshment, and happiness dry up. He brings us to hard spots. Why? So he can grow us. He can grow our faith. You know, we find growth in the Lord in our troubling times. When he tests us, when we are in a test in life, it's a test. And if we don't pass that test, we're going to redo that test till we get it right. He said, well, we used to do that in high school. It was part of a learning process. If you didn't get it right, you had to do it again. You know, in God's learning process, the same thing. You know, but one thing about it, he's grateful enough and he's to do these things for you, to put you back straight when you fall. You know, I'll tell you something else too. Dry brooks reveal your character. It tells you where you're at in life. It tells you what kind of character you got. And it tells you how much confidence you got in God. You know, I say a lot of things that, you know, in life, we look at people, they say, Daddy always said your word was your bond, and all you got is your name. Yeah. And that's it, your name and your word. And if you don't stand true on every one of them, people's not going to believe or stand true with you. No. So what does that do? That builds his character. You know, Daddy tried to build character in us. Every time he break out that belt, he was trying to straighten that character up. Yeah. But you know something? When you build your character, it'll build your confidence in the Lord. You know, we all are slack on confidence. I can tell you that I'm full of it right now. But I can walk out this door right now and before the day's out, I might have a lack of confidence. It might be going by somebody's house and the Lord say, stop. And I'm like, man, I don't have the right stuff to say. Stop anyway. Just go ahead and stop. God will provide. You know, will we judge God and resent him for our circumstances? Will we do that, or will we remember his faithfulness? Think about this a minute. Will you judge him for your circumstances? Or will you remember the faithfulness that he has given us? Will we panic and develop an alternative plan that strays from the principles of faith? Or will we settle in and be still and wait? Boy, that's the main thing. We have a problem that we try to fix it ourselves. That's panic. The Lord says give it all to Him. Everything. Your finances, your way of living, your job. You got problems at work, give it to God. You know, you might can come talk to me, Brother Scott, Brother Tim, Brother Floyd, Brother Jay. You might, Mama Sharon, you might go talk to her and she'll give you some word. And she'll lift you up. But just remember, when God gets you in that circumstances, you got to lean on Him to get that from God that you need.
That's right.
You know, these brothers and sisters, when you go to them, God's going to give them a little something to ease you off.
That's
We're
right.
going to ease you off. But God can fix it all. But we do have a problem. We'll have a problem about wanting to go ahead and get it started. And we should just need to chill out and be still and wait on the Lord.
If God brings you to it, He'll bring you through it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much on that. That is so true. Will we close to believe that the drought is permanent? Or will we zoom out and see this is one chapter, not the whole story? You know, we all have drought in our life. It might not be a water type of drought, but there's other droughts that come in our life. You might be living in a dry desert today. But I'm going to let you know that there's water coming.
That's right.
There's water coming. You just got to say, you got to keep your trust in the Lord. You know, we look in Habakkuk. What's that chapter name?
Habakkuk.
Habakkuk? Okay, Habakkuk. I call it Habakkuk. I want to make sure because I don't get them all the time. We look at Habakkuk, it says, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. Even when there ain't nothing going on, everything's gone to pot and gone to the bad. Just remember one thing, rejoice in the Lord. And God will fill you up with joy. You know, through every setback, failure, and shortfall, God is whispering to us, do you trust me? Do you trust me this morning? There is a peace and quiet confidence when we are left with God alone. You know that when you get in that little spot or wherever God starts speaking to you at, your favorite spot, no matter where it's at, sit with Him a little bit, listen. Open up your heart and just let your mind. Boy, I tell you something. When God gets to speaking up in there, if you'll just turn loose and let Him have your head, I can say just let Him have the whole head.
Yeah.
And just let Him run around in your brain. Man, I'm telling you, that's the time. That is the time. I had a time coming to church this morning, listening to a little gospel music, got into the Spirit a little bit, and it was running through my head and letting God speak to me. Why do I do that? Because I can't teach this lesson.
That's right.
I can teach it. I'd be scared to death if the good Lord went with me.
That's right, Donald.
Jason, you couldn't do it.
That's right.
You can't do things unless God's in it.
That's right.
And He'll do the same for you. All right, 1 Kings 17, 8-12. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. So he arose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there gathering of sticks. And he called to her and said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. And he said, As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. The drought. She didn't have a little teeny bit. She didn't have enough to make just a little teeny bit of cake for her and her son. And then they were going to give up and die. Because why? They were going to starve to death. Because they didn't have nothing else to eat. That was it. Elijah said, before you do that, make me some. I can imagine the widow saying, the gall of that man. If God didn't have it on her mind, anybody else would say, can you just believe what he told me? I just told him I had enough just for me and my son. And we're going to eat it and die. And he's like, well, before you do that, can you make me a little cake? You know, God's plan is not a self-help plan. When we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and chart our self-propelled course on a solo journey, God's plan has always been connection. God's plan has always been connection. We were created to live in community, not isolation. We're not to take the Lord and keep it for ourselves. That's being stingy and that's being selfish. Let me tell you something. That's hard. Selfish is a hard word to take. But when you take God in your heart and you don't share that experience with somebody that knows they need to hear it, you're being a little selfish because you keep your God for yourself. Well, God says you need to tell others about it. So, you know, we can get on and God can send us, we can take our own journey. We can make up our own plan. And we can go out and say, we're going to do this and this and this. But if God's not in it, it ain't going to work. God has to be in it so he can sustain us. I ain't talking about the food and drink, but he needs to sustain us in our walk. I don't know about y'all, but I have to have him help me walk.
Yes.
I have to help, he's got to help me get out of bed. He's got to help me get out of the house. He's sustaining me through all this. He's helping me through all this. And he'll help you also. You know, God bringing a prosperous shepherd with flocks of sheep so that his beloved servant could recover from the birth food and brook water, Elijah was commanded to get provision from an unlikely person. He was instructed to go to a widow, the bottom rung on the social ladder, with a handful of flour and a dash of oil. You know, both had needs. The widow needed faith. Elijah needed flour. The widow needed faith. Elijah needed flour. You know, our lives are limited by bank balances and heartbreaks. But as a participant of God's kingdom, glory happens. You know something? I'm going to tell y'all something. It's important today to make sure you do business with God. And people say, what do you mean by do business? I mean get your heart right with the Lord. Do business with God today before he does business with you on that day. One day you're going to be up there, and if you ain't took care of your business with the Lord, he's going to take care of some business with you. And it's not going to be good. And we need to tell people that. There is not no easy way. We're not selling timeshare here. It's straight. You either are or you ain't. And God will speak to everyone. He speaks. If we turn away, that's up to you and the Lord. You know, but let's remember this formula. It was not widow plus God. It was widow plus Elijah plus God. God is always driving us back to community. It wasn't just coming from God, it was coming from God through Elijah. She had to choose to cooperate with this starving stranger. She had to make a choice. You know, God sustained Elijah by sending him to this widow. Now, let me tell you something. God had his hand with the widow too.
Yes.
Because that widow knew that there was something special coming by. And he chose a widow with very little flour and just enough water to eat and drink and die. With a little bit of nothing. Why is he doing that? So he can show what God's favor is all about. Let's read on now. You know, all right. He said, you know, when we choose this life, we see beyond the troubles of tomorrow and we catch a vision of God's storehouse of blessings that hides behind every challenge we face. God's provision comes with when we trust Him and believe that He is who He says He is in this world. I'm going to read this little story that comes right after. I think it's just real cool. It's about a story. It's told of a town out west in the 1800s. This community suffered under the burden of a long, relentless drought. The pastor of the church called the church together for a special prayer meeting. Word got out and the church was full of